Hey, do you ever just feel creatively stuck? Like you want to create something, but nothing's coming out? Well, you've come to the right place. Today I'm interviewing a dear friend, Barbara Donnell, and she's passionate about helping people joyfully connect to the innate creativity. And so, without further ado, let's get going with episode 33 in 3, 2, 1.
Today's guest, Barbara Donnell.
I'm so excited to have Barbara on today. Let me tell you a little bit about Barbara. In her words, born and reared in St. Louis, Missouri. Yay for Missouri. I too was born in Missouri on the other side of the state, Kansas City. Barbara attended college and graduate school at Middlebury College in Vermont. In Germany. Check this out. She moved to Europe for 10 years, fulfilling her dream of using her French and German language skills by working at UNESCO in Paris in the European Union in Brussels. She put down roots in San Diego, California, where she has lived for the past 35 years. A mother, a poet, a fundraiser, and a teacher, Barbara is now leading groups online in the study of the artist's way. She loves practicing yoga and taking daily beach walks. And I love talking. So without further ado, please welcome Barbara Donnell. Yay!
Hi, Jason.
Hi, Barbara. Welcome to our Ugly Awesome podcast. It's an honor to have you here.
It's awesome. It's really awesome to be with you and see you.
Oh, such a pleasure to see you. So when creativity gets mentioned, many times people start tensing up and going, well, I admire people who are creative, like best-selling authors and painters and poets and musicians, but I'm not at all creative. What do you say to those people?
Well, I start by saying you are creative. You have been created, and you are creating every day. Every breath is an act of creation.
Oh gosh.
And so on a basic primal level, we are so creative. And then, of course, there are those people that love to paint or have a real innate talent, and that's what they do, or they draw, or they write. But Jason, there are so many forms of creativity. You know, I think creativity is, if people think more of I'm creating my life. I'm creating my own work of art based on the unique snowflake that I am. Every snowflake is different. Every human being is different. And so that's where we can sort of untie the knot and maybe relax into it a little bit more.
I love your sense that creativity is a primal nature. We were literally created. I mean, happy. Speaking of that kind of creation, happy belated Mother's Day, by the way.
Thank you. That's probably my greatest creative endeavor ever.
You have you.
Children and rearing children.
I mean that's amazing, and I can only imagine what all goes into that from before birth to
Yeah. To adulthood constantly, Yeah.
mm,
But um, but it's interesting because sometimes when we're in these creative modes, we don't even see it that way. We're just in the zone, we're doing it, and it's maybe later with more introspection or retrospection that we see.
mm. Well, and that we're sometimes just busy doing it. That's a great point.
And Jason, you're the one in my Artist Way classes I give reference to. I just say there was someone in my first Artist Way class who went on to write a book, to do a TEDx talk, and now to have a podcast radio show. And then I always say, and I don't know what else he's doing, but anything is possible with
Mm.
and so that's it.
Thank you, Jennifer Gerald, who's an amazing creator. She's a musician and an author. She says, "Love that. I'm creating my own life."
Way to go, Jennifer. Yes, you are.
So you mentioned that 10th grade was kind of the first turning point on your creative journey. What was life before the specific class in 10th grade?
Yeah. Before 10th grade, I would say creativity wasn't even in my vocabulary. It wasn't on the
Mm.
radar. In my very traditional school, kind of poisonous pedagogy, um, that was not valued, rewarded, praised in any way. It was, academics and book learning and grades that really mattered. And so I I remember striving, to get those good grades and do well in school. But
And that creates a lot of stress. The atmosphere is immensely stressful.
very stressful. And when you're under stress, you don't necessarily tune into your playful, joyous inner child who's keeping the armor up and protecting yourself, and you don't want any more wounding. And so that I would say I was cautious and diligent, and probably there was a lot of fear about authority, teachers, parents. That I'm a bit older. I grew up when there was quite an authoritative approach.
Mm. Speaking of things that are stressful, that's sounds really stressful. It was stressful enough for me growing up when I did in but growing up under an authoritarian approach sounds stressful. But in 10th grade, what happened?
So in 10th grade, Mrs. Gould arrived at my school. She was a new English teacher, and she incorporated creative writing into our more academic English class. She had each student, she gave us a journal, and she had each of us write daily. We would bring it to class. We'd write in class for kind of a warm up. We'd take it home. I wrote all the time. I had to get another journal. And where she touched me was she would collect our journals from time to time and read them. There was no correcting. There was no grammatical, there were no grades. She only commented, almost in a letter form, like, say, and she was the first person to say, Barbara, you are so creative. The way you express that is so poetic. And I never would have thought of that this way, and it just opened me up.
Had you ever kept a journal before that point?
I had, but it was not as expressive. It was more, kind of reflective of the life I lived, very controlled, prescribed, probably very conscious of the grammar. And this was just so freeing. And it was a permission. It was like getting a permission slip to be myself.
So Mrs. Gould really gave you permission to start loving yourself as a creative person.
As a creative person, yes.
So that was a creative turning point. Then what was your next creative turning point?
Well, that led me to really think more independently. And I decided I wanted to go on an exchange program before my senior year in high school. And so I applied, and I went to Switzerland. I was supposed to go to the French-speaking part to use the French that I was learning at school, but I was put into the German-speaking part. And I was supposed to go on the sailing program and sail Lake Geneva, and I ended up in the Alps, rock climbing and jumping into glaciers. And so for me, it was the most daring thing I had done up until then. Midwestern girl, and I'd traveled, but not outside the US. And there I am. I'm going to Switzerland. I'm living with a Swiss family. And just to give you a sense of the cultural differences, my Swiss sister loved Jimi Hendrix. I brought her a Judy Collins LP. Now, I don't know if you know Judy Collins.
Yeah.
Maybe there, but I was so into Judy Collins, and she was into Jimi Hendrix. She's in Switzerland, and I was picturing Heidi in the Alps with the cows, and I mean, not quite, because I knew I was going to Zurich, but instead, there we are, and she had an afro, and she was real edgy and real up to date on social, justice. And I mean, and we got along really well. But again, these, like just the idea that I was going to go abroad, I know this goes back to Mrs. Gould and believing I could, self-trust.
So the first big turning point was Mrs. Gould's within your daily life. Daily school. She emerged, but then the next adventure was almost like you had to step out of your way out of your St. Louis Judy Collins comfort zone too.
Judy Collins' comfort zone, exactly. And the group I went with, it was called the Experiment in International Living, and we had a pre cultural immersion before we went. Just about things to expect, but their motto was expect the unexpected. And I loved that. And we were a group of 12 Americans. We each had a homestay with a family in Switzerland. And then our sisters or brothers, so my Swiss sister, the one with the afro, all the peers, all the group went to this rock climbing school in the Alps, and how to push yourself out of any comfort zone, to jump, to go on crampons and jump with ropes on down a glacier.
Wow.
So, I mean, I think of that as creative living, it's like, or more risky living, I guess. But that I think this all goes when I got to be free from, it should be this way. Instead, it was being more curious, being more open, not judging anything. And that's kind of the artist's way, what I teach. I just love the book and the process.
So how did the artist's way enter your life?
So a friend of mine told me she loved this book, and she had just bought it and it was brand new. And I thought, well, if she likes it, I'll probably like it. So I got it. My daughter was a baby, and my daughter's my first child. And I had no free time, but I was compelled to write the morning pages, back to journaling, 3 pages.
And what would you describe how Julia Cameron describes the morning pages?
Yes. Julia Cameron says, every day you just want to write. You want to write 3 pages. The first 1.5, you might be whining and complaining and just kind of telling a story of what you've been doing. But then the second 1.5 pages, you go a little deeper, and it's total stream of consciousness. Do not censor anything. Just write. Leave grammar behind. And you do this every morning when you're fresh. Right when you get up is the ideal, because you're still a little bit in the dream state. And when you do this every day, it starts accumulating, and you start realizing actions needed, things you continued chronically writing about, and then insights. So things that maybe you're not as aware of. And when you're doing morning pages, you're also taking an artist date once a week. And that is, you're alone with yourself and you do something for your inner child. So it might be going for a walk. But every week change it up. And during COVID, that was a little trickier. You had to be extra creative coming up with ideas. But I would do a lot of walks for my artist date, and I would just say, okay, I'm going to go this neighborhood, or I'm going to, different times of day. So, but together, all of this and the book with exercises helps you discover, uncover, and recover the artist in you. But I like it as a text. It's a good map. It's a good way to just, and I mean, Jason, you can tell everybody the high points of the artist's way and why that does tap into creativity.
I mean, and probably I think it's just the consistency of getting a routine of creating, and then not judging with us really. Like at one point in my life, I would create and I would get on fire if it was really good. But if it wasn't good, I would stop for a few weeks or a month. Like stopping somehow will make it better. But it just makes it harder to start. So that routine is so great.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, specific to my experience, it's so much revolved around the community you created for us.
Oh, and that's what I love doing. I love small group, very intimate, um, and using the book as almost a springboard, but doing a lot with other books and other ideas. And by the end of the Artist's Way class, just that everybody's written a poem without even knowing it, or I mean, just all these different ways of expressing. Remember the soul collage cards?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And just different things.
So cool. So
And
cool.
building a safe community, building a safe space. And from there, everybody flies. But it's like
Mm.
almost having a nest of nurturing and a nest with good nutrients, and everybody builds muscles and takes off.
Hmm.
And in our class, um, I mean, in the one Jason was in, I remember, one woman loved American Sign Language, but she couldn't really afford to be in school. And, it just, but she remembered that in high school, there was one opportunity when she was signing and she felt really good at it. So in the morning pages, that kept coming up. And, fast forward a few more years, she has a degree in American Sign Language.
Oh,
And
so cool. So
she's
cool.
interpreting. And it's really, that's what I think is so great about this process, but also about creativity. We create our own lives.
Um. Oh, before we go on, Speaker Alex Swanson and Barbara Ag. At
Pos-
the time I needed it, he gave me an opportunity to speak on his stages. He has this amazing stage called the Habitat Warrior Conference. And he said I could speak on that. Like I had a lifetime membership, and it helped me transform my career.
How cool, positive, energetic, and awesome. I like those. Wow.
So someone hearing about the artist days might say, well, okay, I have time to write each morning, and I get that 3 pages in the morning. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be writing, but but an artist day, Barbara, I'm a busy person. What's the value of an artist day?
And then I would say, the more you resist, probably the more you really need it. It's totally getting in touch with the child in you, so that you play, that you feel joy, that you experience spontaneity. And that's that is something, the busier we are, maybe we say we love our jobs. But to do one thing every week, to put on your calendar, artist date, or I just say AD, and then I'll write, but you book that time for yourself because, you are worth it. And it's an hour or two, but it feeds the soul. It really does. And you have to trust me on that one. It um it helps. And not going with a friend, because with a friend you're talking, and that's got a different value. But just being by yourself. In Holland, they have something called Niksen, Niksen, and it means do nothing. And it's become very popular. And it got started because people were so stressed. And then this movement, this Nixon movement, came to be an antidote to the go, 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 high pressure, do, do, do. And it's people they're so proud of their Nixon now. And that might just be lying in a park, just lying down on a field of grass, or just sitting and watching the ducks go by on the lake. So,
Will you give a few more examples so people can kind of get a range of get a sense of out-of-state possibilities?
sure, it can cost you not a penny. Turn on some music and dance. Dance with yourself. 1 hour. You can just go on a scavenger hunt. Go look for conch shells, even if you don't find any, or climb a tree, or have a cup of tea and, really make that linger. Just a very mindful time. And these are more COVID ideas, but before COVID, I would actually go to an art museum and see an exhibit that I loved or wanted to see, or you can go to a movie, but only by yourself. And yeah, I hope that gives enough examples.
Jennifer says, love it. Simple breakdown, just one thing a week.
One thing a week. That's it. And, just to book it on your calendar and value yourself as you would value an appointment with somebody else.
And Eric says, I've been Nixoning for years and years and years. Awesome.
Right. Maybe before it became, popular in Holland.
So what would you say to a person who's like reasonably creative in their life, but wants to expand their creativity?
Yeah. Well, I would recommend The Artist's Way book.
By Julia Cameron.
By Julia Cameron, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. Just because that gives you a structure, and that'll break you open in ways that every chapter has a theme, 12 chapters. And, you could do one a week. You could do one every 2 weeks. You could just spread it over a year and do one a month. You could have a buddy. You could take a class, whatever's going to work for you. I would recommend just read the basic tools at the beginning, which talk about the artist date and the morning pages, and read chapter 1 and see, am I self-motivated enough to do the tasks and the exercises. But what happens is you start answering these questions, writing in your morning pages, and really, I mean, you're going to be amazed. It's as if you've been on a maybe dirt road, and there are grooves in the road, and maybe you feel like your tires, just been spinning. Well, all of a sudden, you see this mountain and all these different pathways, and you get to try them out, and you will be giddy. You will be so excited by possibilities.
That's just such a beautiful image. The ruts in the gravel road, and then you see a mountain suddenly.
Yeah. And I don't know if I have this right here. I wanted to show it, but yeah, I do. Just a minute.
The road is your oyster.
So it is. I mean, it's your oyster. So it's for you to do.
What other resources along with the Artist's Way would you recommend?
I love books, but my goodness, our world is so rich with offerings. You can Google, and this time I've been teaching the Artist's Way, and because it's online, it's so different than when we had our meetings in person. I used to have a house, and I would invite, the class would meet in the kitchen, and we'd, just chat a little bit before. We'd have snacks or something, a little bite, and then we'd get down to work, and we'd usually do an hour of the Artist's Way book and an hour of exercises, just creative. But this is something that I did with, that came up that feels very creative, and you could do this too. Every morning when I know everybody in the class is writing morning pages, I send a text. But the text it's always something different. It's a quote or a piece of music or something, funny, silly, but and then the group answers in text thread. So there's just this bonding that happens. And it's a very little example of creativity, but I know everybody listening to this and watching has all kinds of ideas. Maybe you don't even know what they are, but you start writing in your morning pages, and these ideas pop in.
The text you're talking about is an innovation since since we did it, and it sounds like a great innovation.
There's so much we're not able to do, but this is something we can do that's really enhancing. And I have to take 3 chapters and do them all at once. And, Jason, remember how we did 1 chapter at a time? And so that was a challenge at first, but now I feel like, wow, this is just another way of doing it. So I think for everybody listening, when you start with, I am a creative being, I love to create, and then, my life is my creation. My creative process is always unfolding. So you're not limiting, there isn't one way. And maybe our greatest enemy, but also a good friend, is our fear. And our fear can't drive the bus, Elizabeth Gilbert says, fear can sit on the bus. Fear's part of our journey, but may not vote and may not sit and drive. But our fears maybe are what's holding us back. And what's that fear about? Be really curious. Give that fear a name. Is it, and maybe it goes back to a teacher or a parent or a sibling or a friend who wasn't really a very good friend, but whatever those fears are, there's a lot that we can learn from, and that might be holding us back.
So what do I do if I feel my fear of getting it wrong as driving the bus? If I write a sentence and start erasing because I'm so afraid of not doing it right.
Yeah, you can start writing. You can just talk it into your phone, and usually there's an emotion that's wrapped in this. We are complex human beings, but we simply want joy, love, peace, and freedom. We'll do anything for that, but we'll also protect ourselves from being hurt again if the fears have been harsh. So for me, just get it on paper loosens things. And then maybe the idea of even role playing with fear, if you give it a name, and maybe you don't even know about the fear, but if you do these exercises in the book, you excavate your life. You start remembering, oh, she calls them monsters. Who were the monsters, but who were also the champions in your life? So that's a way to work through that. And that's more psychological and big, but just a day-to-day practical, I would say draw a card. If you've got any decks of cards, and anything to get your mind out of that rut where you can see the wheel spinning in the
Gravel road.
Yeah, it's just stuck. So when you're stuck, you say, I'm stuck. And it's not, oh, I'm stuck again. It's just, I'm stuck. And then you can say, do I want to be stuck? Yeah, maybe I do, or no, I don't. So what would be, and you play. Play is the antidote.
One trap I've often fallen in is as I'm creating morning pages or whatever, I start thinking about, oh, how can I publish this? A singer might be creating lyrics and be suddenly thinking about how can I sing this on American Idol.
Do you do that? You already think top of the line.
I mean, I used to do it more than I do now, and it could be really constricting because,
I was going to say, did that kind of paralyze you a little bit or freeze you?
I'm not literally freeze, but it definitely shut down the creative flow to a trickle. So
Yeah, and that's the piece, that child, when we're really a child, before, in the magic years, before we feel all these inhibitions, when we are in the creative process, when we don't even know that's what it is. We're just creating in a sandbox. We're creating imaginative play. I used to spend hours in this one room because I shared a bedroom and, tight quarters, but I would just go to, it wasn't the attic, but it could have been all musty and crowded, but I could play in there. So wherever that is that you can play and forget about the outer world, forget about where is this going, but just being in the present moment.
So I love it. You find your place within yourself. Maybe it's a little place like the room, or at least a place within yourself that you can play.
That's right. Boy, Jason, that is so important.
Hmm.
People say, but I don't have, I live in 300 square feet. There's no room. I cannot create that. Well, you just make a corner. Because the act of saying, this is my creative spot, and don't go all out because that'll be intimidating. You'll think, oh, I'm not worth this. Just begin. And maybe it's playfully putting a couple cards out or putting a different tablecloth on or taking butcher block paper and painting Jackson Pollock style or whatever it is. You just want to begin. And beginner's mind, as we know, is so much more the creative mind.
And it's so exciting to be in that place of that beginner's
Where you're
mind.
just, well, I always think of you with your enthusiasm and I've seen you in that place so many times.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that creativity ties into health and well-being. How 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 is that? Isn't creativity just something we do for a little bit and put aside
Well,
and get back to being an adult?
creativity. Well, if I'll start with morning pages because it's been researched. If you journal, every day, it's not only good for your brain, it's really good for the synapses and just so much. But if you are, if you're writing or typing your morning pages, whatever you're doing, it, they did a series or a study with nuns, and they all journaled. And Alzheimer's, they they were able, even some that had the genes for Alzheimer's, they did not get Alzheimer's. They were writing, and they were in this creative mode. It puts the brain in, the brain waves in a more peaceful mode. So
And does it affect the body too, do you think?
when the brain is like that, we have three brains. We've got this one and then our heart and our gut. So when this one, and in yoga, we always say when the mind is relaxed, the body is relaxed. So it's a mind body connection. It's not, you're not doing that. You're not writing in isolation. I mean, what you do for your creativity impacts your whole body.
You're now writing in isolation what you do with your creativity, for your creativity impacts your whole body.
It
Wow. Wow.
it totally affects everything. I mean, if we got all wired up, I'm sure, then if a neuroscientist could do a study, because a lot has been studied. And we know how good we feel when we are in a state of joy, in a state of playfulness.
Speaking of yoga, how does yoga tie into this whole conversation?
Wow, that's great you asked. I can speak, to my practice and to how yoga has really been an integral part. I would say, um, what I'm writing about in morning pages, I always have like a little spiritual practice that's part of my morning pages, which really ties to yoga. And I have these 7 spiritual laws, but this is just my little practice. And, each one is assigned to a day. So today is the law of least effort. But yesterday was the law of karma. And so each, but I write a little bit about the day and that law. And then I just think my intention, which I set in my morning pages, is, um, I write, I kind of elongate what I'm saying in my morning pages. And that's a yogic practice. That's not the movement part, but it's more a meditative writing part.
Speaking of yoga, we were in yoga teacher training together, and and um and you, as part of the class you did for your final project, you talked about the lotus, and it occurs to me that the lotus is a perfect metaphor for for the last year of our collective lives.
Wow. It is.
So,
It is.
so
And the,
what about the lotus?
I mean, and that was the lotus that can only be out of mud. So no mud, no lotus, as Thich Nhat Hanh says. And it's so true that this year, this COVID year, this COVID chapter, I won't even put a time limit on it or whatever. It's just this has been, but I don't know about you. I feel like as hard as it's been and has awful, and I mean, just what people have suffered. I never want to, in any way dismiss that. But the gifts, there have been these gifts of going deeper, slowing down, you know, maybe some well, and a lot of uprooting that needs our attention. And hopefully there will be bigger healing.
Oh, Jennifer Joe says muddy happiness. Muddy happiness.
Steady happiness. And to
Yeah, that's a song title for you, Jennifer. That's brilliant. Muddy happiness was 2020. However, you can build a castle from mud.
you certainly can. And
Hmm.
mud can harden and be this clay, it's just so true.
So what else? What questions am I not asking that I need to?
Aw. Well, I love the participation. And I wonder if anybody has any questions or more comments. It's great to hear from the audience. Jason, you're a wonderful interviewer. I think you've been very, very thorough. Um, let's see if I can think of. Um, for me, creativity is the antidote to stuckness, and so to feel stuck but want to be creative, is to maybe go a little deeper And then it's, well, what's holding me back? Is it fears? Is it patterns? Is it something unconscious? And some unconscious, how do we tap into that? And so in my current Artist's Way group, because we only meet online and because we do 3 chapters at one time, I have everybody, we meet once a month, and I have everybody paired each month with, I call them a believing mirror. So, every week, each person calls this friend, and the assignment is, you are a witness. You don't give advice, you don't fix anything, you listen. And so one person does the talking and then you switch. But that, I think, is also getting into the mud, but getting into the nutrients too. Because that mud is where the darkness is. That mud is where the seeds are planted. And, they're not visible, but that's what they do, a lot of work to grow. And without that, we wouldn't have spring.
Just giving people the opportunity to be listened to without being corrected or without getting someone else's opinion, that can be so healing. I love that.
It can be so healing. And that's where the artist date, being alone, is so valuable. How do you keep going when you just keep falling over in you? That's so cute. Modify the pose. That's what we always learned. And Jennifer, just so you know, in our yoga teacher training, there was one time I did fall over. I remember. And then we all laughed, and then I got back up. So it's okay to fall, but if you feel like you're always falling over, you can alter the pose just enough so you don't have to fall, but you can challenge yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know this before I studied yoga, but yoga can when it's taught well, it can be all about adaptation. I did yoga for a decade, and I definitely didn't start off with a yoga body, and I still don't quite have the yoga body.
Oh, yes, you do. You are a yogi. And I remember being paired with you when we did inversions. So there were Jason and I doing handstands and headstands and, things we just thought, wait a minute, you know. So that's another part. And I would say that's an aspect of creativity, taking the risks, because we won't know unless we try. And I certainly was blown away by what I could do, thinking, oh my gosh, age wise, no, no, no. So,
So, so, we're wrapping this all up. I always ask my guests, well, when I remember, I didn't remember last week, but well, to me, I talk about imperfect best, and to me, it means like finding the middle ground in life between being a perfectionist and being a slacker, and learning from the mistakes and moving forward rather than using them as excuses to stop. But what is doing going for your imperfect best mean to you from your perspective as a profoundly creative person?
oh, well, I think it's accepting that I am going to create what I create, that this unique snowflake is probably not going to win a Nobel Prize and is probably not going to, there are things that might not happen, but I can live in this moment and I can be joyous in being alive. It's so basic because it's like, knowing people that have died or have terminal illnesses. And, I unfortunately I'm at this age where, well, and it can happen to any of us. But I
Yeah.
just think the more I am on that that branch that just is so aware of the miracle of this moment, it makes me want to create as imperfectly, I mean, without any judgment attached, just enjoy the act of creating. And then to teach that is so gratifying because
Mm.
I start seeing everybody, doing these great things, in my group now. At the beginning, I write poetry, but I didn't really share that with the group, but they kind of knew I liked poetry. Well, now we're on the ninth chapter, and everybody's writing poetry, and they can't get enough of it. And
Oh,
if you'd asked, I mean, before we started, that would not have even been on their radar, and that's exciting.
Jennifer said, thank you so much. Create your best day. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah.
So speaking of these online artist way groups, if someone's interested in this, should they contact me and then I'll relay it to you? Is that best?
Would be great because I keep thinking I'm not going to teach again. I'm going to do but if there's a group, I'd love to know, and we can take it from there. We'll be creative. We'll see what comes of it.
Cool. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to be in an extraordinary artist way group and create everything I can create out of it and learn everything I can learn, please Facebook message me, email me. Probably those two. I don't do too well with smoke signals. I don't do Morse code, so don't do that. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. It's been such an honor.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's great to see you.
Great to see you too. Miss you.
And I miss you. Miss you too. Bye.
Bye. So, wasn't that an amazing? I'm inspired to create now. I hope you are too. Barbara's just amazing. So, speaking of creativity, last time I was going to do the outro and I put the intro on, and I was concentrating on other stuff and I thought the thank you message was playing, but then I'm like, today's guest? What? Oh, no. So today I'm putting on the outro. Okay, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Please join us and have an awkwardly awesome week.